Hey guys, JP here. Just thought I'd do a quick run through of three-dimensional space for you. And by that I simply mean within this image that we have here, there's this really nice kind of depth to the image with these musical sheets. And by that I simply set up a front, a middle, and a back so you can see that there's kind of different distances, etc. So how do you make something like that believable? Okay, well, the first thing you would do is you go to scripts and you go to load files into stack and we browse. So I've got all these amazing packs from RawEx here, and so I load in the first one, which would just be the dust, and then if I go back to my other packs I've got the musical sheets down here. So let's add in some of these just as a quick demonstration and then click OK. So that adds in all of these files into this stack for us. So, now that we're here, if I drag these over, so all I'm doing here is selecting all these layers and just dragging and dropping them into this. That dialog came up because these are in sRGB and the color space I'm working in is actually Adobe, so it's just asking me, what would you like us to do with the way we manage color? And I just said, preserve the way it looks. I want it to look the same. So, we now have all of this really cool stuff here. So, first things first, you've got your dust. You're thinking, okay, how do I use this? What am I doing with this? Some of you may know, some of you may not, so I'll be quick enough, just in case. You set the blend mode to screen, and immediately, perfection. Look at that. It's just in the scene as dust. Crazy. So, Command and T or Control and T, move it around to, where you're happy. So let's say somewhere around here is pretty cool. So then what we're going to do is add a layer mask, and then paint onto this in black on the actual layer mask down here, and that will allow you to paint what's visible and what's not visible. Again, this is really basic stuff, like some of you guys are going to know this stuff already, but some of you may not. So let's say we've just painted this in here. You're left now with our dust, and we're like, okay, that's cool, but still kind of not feeling it. How can we make it even better? Well, personally, what I would do is Command and U. Make sure you got this actual layer selected, not the layer mask. And then Command and U or Control and U. Got to colorize. And I'd pick something which fit the scene a bit more. So let's go a bit more yellow. And then turn the saturation down. And just maybe touch it up just a little bit. So it's kind of around here. And put the opacity down. And just gently drag the opacity back up. So somewhere around here. That looks like it fits in the scene far better now. And then what you can even do if you want to add some movement is you can go to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur, and then you can blur the image like this. So it looks like there's some real motion. But you don't want to get it too much because you lack the detail, but you want to get enough so it looks like there's some motion in there. So that's our first thing right in the scene. So this is nothing new right now. This is the kind of the two-dimensional space because this is in focus and this is in focus. Obviously it's moving, but it's on the focal plane. So how do we do three-dimensional space? Really, really simple. First things first, let's say this one is further away in the scene. We know how to blend it. We just simply put it to screen and then we resize it, Command and T. And then right now I'm holding Shift and Alt so that Shift locks the kind of aspect ratio or whatever you want to call it, the aspects. Alt will mimic on the other side, so whatever you do on one side will copy on the other. So let's put this one in the background. This is what we want in the background. And then we'll have this one here. We'll put this to screen mode 2. And this one, let's say we want this one smack bang in the middle. So something along those lines. So let's put it about here. And then let's say this one we want really close to the camera. So here we go. Screen. So now we've got three different things. As you can tell, I mean, other than size, there's nothing really to tell us where these are placed. I mean, these all look like they're on the same plane to me. And this, I can tell this is kind of closer because it's just huge, but it doesn't really translate that well. So a really, really, really easy thing you can do is if this one is further in the back, let's say it's roughly this far back, you look at the blur that's already in the scene, you go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian or Gaussian blur, whichever one you use, and you look at kind of blurring it a similar amount, and that actually looks pretty close to me. So let's blur it kind of around that. And then the front, again, blur, Gaussian blur, and copy the blur in the scene. So it's really, really blurry here. So here's a bit sharper. So maybe somewhere around here looks not too bad. And then the center one, that already now has 3-dimensional space, but there is some motion to it. So I'd add kind of just a 2-pixel blur just to take the edge off. And then what you can do once you've done all those things and you've got the kind of 3-dimensional space set up, you can add some motion to the scene. So what you do then is just very simply go to blur, motion blur, pick the direction of travel, and you can just go in and sort that motion here as well. So immediately, really, really quickly, you can see how we've managed to achieve... Well, hey, check that out. Didn't want to click that. You can see how we've managed motion blur to create 3-dimensional space. And obviously the other thing to take into consideration is there's going to be less motion the further something is away. So you want the motion blur to be less on the further away things and more on the closer things. Unless, of course, the thing in the distance was traveling, way faster than the thing closer to the camera. But let's assume, for the sake of simplicity, they're all traveling similar speeds. So there you go. That's really, really simple. So all we've done here is Gaussian blur and then motion blurred, and created this more 3-dimensional space. So all I've done here is taken it up a level. So I've added the dust here. I've added the musical sheets. Just some simple toning, which is basically just blues in the shadows. Some focus. Focus is basically a layer where I like to kind of... It's just, I wouldn't say a fancy way. It's a non-fancy way of saying vignette. And some sharpening and logo. That's it. Job done. I was going to say simplicity, but simple. Hope that helped you guys out to think a bit more about when you're compositing things into a scene. You can create more of a 3-dimensional space using blur. And one final tip, actually. You may notice in this stuff that things look a bit odd after you've blurred them. A really, really simple way around that, so things fit into a scene more, is if you go into any of this stuff that you've blurred, you go to Filter, Noise, Add Noise, and then just add, say, like 3 to 5%, and you can add noise over all of these, and it will make them blend into the scene far better. However, the downside to that is you will get the square show up again. So there's 2 ways you can fix that. You can either Command and L and shift the center, which does change the toning a little bit, but it will get rid of the square. Just shift it to the right to make it darker. Or you can obviously go into your layer mask here, and you can use black to paint out everything around the outside, with the exception of what you want to keep. So that's 2 ways of making something blend even more into a scene. And that's it. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope you've learned something new to take on your way. Have a good one. Thanks. Bye.